Hawaii Part 2 is my favorite album of all time. It's a piece of fiction that I'm just constantly returning to, putting it on in the background while working, or even just zoning out and experiencing the bliss of it. It is a very hard album to sell to people though. The name of the uploaders in Japanese making it a lot harder to find for English speakers, and the lyrics can be super hard to decipher. If this is your first time hearing about it, and you're looking at the video length for just one song, your first guess would probably be that the album is super hard to approach. These lyrics are built on top of incredibly sounding music though. Even if you don't get it, you can still appreciate the beauty of the music, but the songs just get so much better if you actually do understand them. This is where I come in. If you're unfamiliar with me, I'm Luxy. I've done my fair share of rhetorical analyses, and I want to make this album as accessible as possible. I want the artistic beauty of Hawaii Part 2 to be fully understood, and I'm going to be doing it one song at a time. This is probably going to take months to complete as it currently stands, and taking a break from my channel to make a 4-hour thesis video isn't really my energy. So let's compromise a little. I'll break the album down one song at a time, and then when I'm done, I will stitch everything together and make that 4-hour analysis video, so there can be piecemeal content and the big, long, bingeable video. Speaking of the analysis, we should probably move into that. Let's start discussing the first song, Introduction to the Island to Thyself. Yeah, so let's get the elephant out of the room with this analysis. The first song on this album, Introduction to the Snow, while being very important to the story, is not where we're starting. Based on my interpretation of the events, this is definitely more of a wraparound piece, and it would make sense to analyze this along with Dream Suite in C major and Variations on a Cloud, which means it shall be skipped. And now we will sail directly into Island to Thyself. Actually, one last thing before we get into it. If you have a different interpretation, I'd love to hear it in the comments, and if you want more of this, please hit subscribe. I want to make more analysis content in the future, and subscribing would help me out with that. Sorry about that, let's just get right back into the analysis. So as I stated previously, Island to Thyself is the second song in the album. Importantly enough, it's one of 2 songs in the album to actually have a music video. I'll be looking into it at the end after we've gone through the lyrics, but just so you're familiar, I'll be using it as filler footage throughout the video. Also keep in mind that this album is a concept album. What that means, for those who don't know, is that it's telling a story throughout its whole album. Our story follows about 2 characters. I promise it will make sense later, but for now we're just gonna stick with it being 2. There's the male lead, which the fandom has dubbed as Simon. I'll explain why when it's relevant. And then we have the female lead. She doesn't have a confirmed name, or a fanon name. So, since I'm a nerd for Adventure Time, we're gonna call her Betty. Forgive me for going off topic, but both their stories are very tragic, so I think this fits nicely. I've waffled for like 3 minutes, so we should probably break down the lyrics now. The name of the song, Island to Thyself, and the album Hawaii Part 2 gives us important background information. Simon, the previously established male lead here, is on a trip to Hawaii. A common interpretation from fans is that it's his second time to the island, hence Hawaii Part 2. I personally subscribe to that notion for some unsettling reasons, which will become evident as we explore the lyrics more. Unlike that speculative bit though, we do know that he's going to a wedding, as hinted at by the song title White Ball. I'll go into it more there, but all you need to take away here is that he's going to a wedding in Hawaii. Now let's jump into the chorus.
Lightning shines, star. You won't see so far. No one shine. Feel carried on.
This portion repeats twice in the song. It is played before and after the first verse. I think this is relevant because it's the only part that's actually sung by Betty in the song, so there's definitely some kind of symbol at play. Her voice, despite being the chorus, is also part of the instrumental in this case. This signals to me that Betty is going to be a backing role in Simon's story, as she's merely playing a supporting role at the start of Simon's character arc. This stanza has her calling out to a bright star in the sky. It seems as though she's calling for its help or even praying to it. Lines 3 and 4 tell us that she wants knowledge she can't access, and as we will see soon, I think she's seeking the truth about her relationship with Simon. Another piece of symbolism regarding the placement of the chorus is that Betty calling to a god is basically the trigger point for Simon questioning what's wrong in his relationship. This is further explored in the first verse.
You were an island to thyself, You had a heart you hadn't felt. Why would it hurt me? Or was it real?
Throughout the entirety of the song, it's fairly obvious that the conversation going on here is between just Simon. He frequently references himself in the first person, and he's referring to somebody else in the second person here, which is very common for how you talk about yourself in your head and about other people in your head. Anyways, he's referring to a you here, and the only other main player on the album is Betty. I don't think it's a leap to say that he's referring to her, unless there's some kind of third person involved. His first mention of Betty is calling her an island. The island metaphor is a point repeated many times in this song. Islands, being completely surrounded by water, are isolated from other things. Now this means that Betty is either physically or emotionally isolated from Simon, or both. I think she's just emotionally isolated from Simon. Why? It's directly backed up by line 2 here. Simon basically just said that she can't feel her heart. This is a very common metaphor for calling somebody cold and distant. Lines 3 and 4 switch this up though. I was confused about the line "why would it hurt me" for a while, but I think he's saying that maybe Simon is the one being emotionally distant, not Betty. Line 4 pretty much backs up this claim. He directly questions his claim that Betty doesn't feel any love. To me, this is kind of Simon's epiphany moment. The second half of the first verse also builds on this idea.
It was the night we had to part. We were afraid to miss the start. What did it matter? Why would it matter? And could we heal?
Line 1 is very explicitly them going to Hawaii. Line 2 continues to build on that idea, but I think it also has a double meaning behind it. While yes, there's the very common fear of missing your flight, this also reads as Simon being afraid he's going to miss the next stage in his relationship. A kind of new start, if you will. I think lines 3 and 4 here call out the significance of Hawaii. What does Hawaii matter to Simon, and why does Hawaii matter to Simon? And then he answers his own question in the next line. Is Hawaii going to be the thing that fixes our relationship? Will it finally bring us back together? And just as a reminder, this section is bookended by the chorus, where Betty wishes upon a star to know the truth. This then transitions right into the first bridge.
I was a victim of magic.
Okay, I know this is a very sudden stop, but this is a very important line. Simon is being put under a spell by Apollo. Wait, Apollo? Why Apollo? The invoking of Apollo here in specific is very interesting. First off, Apollo is the series of space missions by NASA to get to the moon. If you really think about it, other celestial bodies are perhaps the ultimate island, being so far away from Earth that they're impossible to reach normally. I think this is Simon saying that he wants to bridge the gap between him and Betty. He wants to do his own Apollo mission to fix his relationship with her. And secondly, Apollo was a Greek god of many things. Relevant to our story here, though, is his control over truth, healing, prophecy, and light. To put it simply, Simon was swayed by Apollo to do all of these things, being a bastion for healing, truth, and light. But the idea of prophecy is here too. And this story is not a happy tale for Simon. So while he was guided by those ideals, ultimately prophecy will win here. Also building on the idea of light, Betty was praying to a shining star in the sky earlier. Was she perhaps praying to Apollo unknowingly? Also consider, Simon was literally a victim of magic by Apollo after Betty prayed to him. At this point, Simon has now moved past lamenting about his relationship. Relationship issues are sometimes translated into the physical. While Simon isn't literally bleeding here, I don't personally believe Betty hurt him anyways. He was still suffering the pain of a failing relationship. The line "catching my breath" then is him being able to feel normal again about his love life. I think lines 2 and 3 here have a double meaning again. I think this is both Apollo and Betty beckoning him. In the real world, Betty's calling for him to come along because they've just reached Hawaii. In his mind though, Simon is being pushed forward by Apollo. He's under his spell, so he'll do anything that he says.
Then all the planets fell to dust, lonely departing after us, gone not forgot. long but forgotten, oh Lord.
The planets falling to dust is a very strange line, but referencing the metaphor of celestial bodies being the ultimate islands, them falling to dust can be taken as Simon's emotionally distant mental state fading away. They've been reduced to dust, and as the nature of dust is, it's very small and insignificant, only being a minor annoyance really. Again, this line breaks down in two ways. The very literal and baseline interpretation is that an entity called lonely is departing, as in it's literally leaving. The more realistic literal interpretation is that Simon's loneliness has just died. It got reduced to dust, so it's dead now. This literal interpretation is continued with lines 3 and 4. That section of the song is basically just saying he's not going to forget his loneliness issues, and he's going to use them as a reference point going forward. The phrase old lore is being used as a way to say Simon can look back at this as old lore, as old stories. Human learning is built specifically on stories. So if, say, Simon wants to learn from his mistakes, he's got to keep those memories around of loneliness. The other interpretation of this stanza is a very cosmological one. In the universe, things are very insignificant, including humanity and people's feelings. The old lore, in this case of the universe, is life and planets dying. The cosmological significance of these things is nil. It's just a footnote in a book. Whose book? Probably Apollo's book. Humanity itself is probably old lore to Apollo. This is also saying that death doesn't really matter, which is the theme that will probably come back later.
In every element of life, love camouflaging under strife, or other matters, minds over matters, let there be more.
This is probably the most straightforward stanza in the entire song. Love finds itself hidden under struggles, and your mind is more powerful than your body. I like to discuss something really quick in this section actually. There's a lot of evidence in this piece pointing to it being in the late 60s. I'll point it up if it's relevant, and the reason I bring it up here is because, well, in that time period, Simon would be the breadwinner. He would be the one doing all the work, and probably being thrown in the garbage bin by companies. Which kind of points to this being a subtle critique of capitalism. It's not a very deep critique at all, it's basically just saying work sucks. I'm not gonna argue with that point exactly, but I'm just saying it's there.
Maybe you exit to my sorrows. Your eyes, sudden invincible flow.
And now to me, this is the hardest portion of the song to interpret. It is the last little bit before the outro stinger. All points are basically buried deeply in symbolism, but what makes the most sense to me is Simon basically saying, hey Betty, I want you to release your isolationist feelings too. He wants her to exit her sorrow as well. And then he'll sweep her off as the planets crumble into dust around her. This is probably a stretch, but it's the only thing that really works for me. But replying is a synonym for acknowledge. So this could just be a really cryptic way for Simon to say that her island is letting her go free. The last two lines then just say, hey, you're gonna be strong and you're gonna be able to see things now. Interestingly though, the line clearer than all thou might view with thine eyes is sung in a stereotypically ancient way. This feels like another reference to Apollo and the truth, though admittedly it's a much looser one. We then enter the closing number.
Why did fire erupt and lands arise? Why did murderous animals survive? Why did we deserve to be revived? Why was it everything alive?
This is the transitory bit before we enter Black Rainbows, the third song. I don't think this part has any metaphorical meaning really, it's mainly just referencing other songs in the album. The Fire Erupted Lands portion is either this or Black Rainbows. The Murderous Animals line definitely refers to the song Murders, there's no way around that. The line about being revived is a little more confusing though. If I had to posit something, my guess would be that the line is referring to both the Mind Electric and Space Station Level 7 here. And then the final one definitely refers to Stranded Lullaby. And like Island to Thyself, I will save the analysis for these songs much later. Remember, Tragedy's only 3 songs away, so be on the lookout for that. Before breaking down the song's themes, I'd like to talk about the music video. This is going to mainly be me talking. I won't play the music because you've heard the whole song at this point, but I will provide footage to make things clear. The imagery in the music video flows very nicely with my interpretation. To sum it up, a whale and an octopus were in happy matrimony together before they were forced to separate. We exclusively follow the whale throughout this sequence in a similar way to how we focused on Simon. The whale is forced to adapt to many different hardships, shedding its old form in favor of something new and more fitting of the situation. And while it meets new animals to befriend, they don't really stick around. Eventually, after an introduction to the snow, the two of them reunite on land. The octopus seems to have gone through similar evolution stages as the whale. This is definitely the music video saying that Simon and Betty have gone through the same struggles. They eventually descend back into the ocean after an ice sheet breaks. They shed all their extra mutations and return to their original form. If my breakdown of the lyrics didn't convince you of the meaning behind this song, then surely the music video should. There are 2 key takeaways I think you should get from this. First, we have a concrete piece of evidence that this song is set in the 60s. The entire song is in grayscale, and while color television certainly existed, it wasn't popular until the very late 60s. Also, when we refer to something in the past, we tend to think of it in black and white, so this is definitely an allusion to this being in the past. And secondly, the much more lore important thing, Simon is the whale here. What, you don't see how that's important? The whale is referenced in a couple of places. It's referenced here, it's referenced in Dream Suite in C major, and it's referenced on the cover of the album itself. I probably forgot if there's another instance, but those are the main ones. It's also very important to mention that Simon is a white whale, like Moby Dick. I will definitely break down that metaphor much later in Dream Suite in C major, but keep in mind, Simon is a white whale. That's the main takeaway you need from this music video. I'd like to move on to the message of the song now. While these songs all come together in a big meaning at the end, each of them also conveys their own separate message. Despite the lyrics here being very weird, the ideology of the song can be broken down into one word: change. Simon was only able to grow as a person because he changed his mind on things. He started at the beginning of the song blaming Betty, but realized he was the problem. He wanted to fix things by changing his mental state, and he hopes he can change Betty for the better too. This change made his island disappear. So yeah, a pretty wholesome opening here. The album itself has a very dark reputation, not like unsettling, but the music can be kind of frightening at times. And speaking of scary, if you've listened to this album before, you know what's about to happen to Simon. That man will be torn apart and put through the ringer. But for now, let's just pretend that Simon and Betty have a happy ending on the island. Next in this series of analysis is Black Rainbows. If you'd like to keep up with this series and eventually find the big video at the end, why not subscribe? Just a reminder, it's free. If it makes you happy, it makes me happy too, and the opportunity cost is nearly nothing. Thanks for watching. I'll hopefully see you around. Ciao.